Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world and whatever time you're listening. Welcome to episode 2 of the Tortcast. Now, I received some feedback from the first episode. Thank you very much to everybody who listened. And one of the most dominant pieces of feedback was to talk a little bit more about myself, introduce myself. Because half the time I'm addressing listeners who I know who know me, but obviously we have listeners here who don't know me, so I'll give you some introductions. My name is Lewis, and I set up the Tortcast primarily to have a means of kind of showcasing different people around the world and what their lives are like, and how similar they are to anybody else in the world. So I live in Finland. I'm from the UK, but now live in Finland after living in Russia. It's quite complicated. But I'm living here in Finland, and I'm now working in a project that is helping to prevent bushfires in California. So that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment, and this is my little side hobby. Now, sadly, there was a technical error. I was supposed to have a different guest who will be on next weekend instead, but I've been having trouble with headphones, and we only have 5 minutes of recorded audio from that entire episode, which I guess I could provide as a sneak preview at the end if you're interested as to who's coming on next weekend. But for now, we have a new surprise guest who isn't really much of a surprise. It is, in fact, my girlfriend who I live with, Liida. She is from Finland, and I'm sure she'll have a lot to tell you about what life is like here in Finland. And in Russia, as she spent some time in Russia. But hey, we'll learn more about her from herself. But now let's get on with the show, and welcome to the Tortcast. So, welcome aboard, Liida.
Thank you very much.
How have you been coping since the coronavirus? How have you found living with me?
Fine, I guess. I honestly, coronavirus hasn't changed many things for me personally, because I still go to work. They cut our hours a little bit, but that's also, I still work 20 hours a week or something, so... And I find fine living with you.
I have voiced a few concerns with your work, really, though Finland has been faring very well with the coronavirus. It is commendable. There is still the fear of a second peak, but, I think it is important that Liida has been able to keep on working. Don't you think that you've been able to keep on working?
Yeah, I'm still... Yeah, I mean, of course there are risks, but... You can't just stop living completely. I think if you take, I always take good care of my hygiene at work, wash my hands a lot. I keep my gloves on, especially if I'm handling cash. And I also, clean all the surfaces a couple times a day with disinfectant and stuff. So, and keep some distance. It is hard keeping distance, though, because it's a very tiny shop. And that is hard, but, what you gonna do?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're not going to be dwelling on coronavirus too much with this podcast. Don't worry. What we will be talking about mostly is, for example, differences between Finland and the UK, and also Russia, because we do have both of us lived in Russia for a while, and Liida knows more about Russia than I do, so it'd be interesting to hear her perspective. So, how did you find your short time in the UK? What would you say is the first notable difference that you feel? Because I've been saying ever since I've been living here in Finland that there are a lot of similarities between the UK and Finland.
Yeah.
Finnish culture and British culture are very aligned with the way they handle kind of how you handle your own self-reservation and how you approach strangers or not approach strangers in Finnish case. But yeah, what would you say the first notable difference is?
Well, I mean, first thing that comes to mind that sometimes annoy me is how polite in a way British people are. It just annoys me when I went to the shop and they're like, I know it's not like they actually mean it, but when they ask oh, hello, how are you and stuff, I'm just like, why do you... obviously they don't care, it's just what they say, but in Finland it would be so weird if I would go to a shop and they would just be like, hi, how are you doing today? I would be just like, fuck off. That's none of your business.
Yeah.
That's something, and just I think there's been moments when I don't know, Lewis has been I wasn't so polite or something. Like in some moments, I'm just like, Finns don't care.
Yeah, in Finland, small talk is non-existent.
No.
And when they do try small talk, you can tell that their mind is bending and breaking at the seams. For example, if you ever enter a lift with a Finn, there'll either be one of two scenarios. Either complete silence, which honestly is the more preferable of the two scenarios, or the second scenario will be somebody says hi, like, or bye, just as the lift doors are closing at the very end, you know, as one of you leaves, or if you both leave, then, you know, there's that awkward bye or whatever. And you can just tell that that person was really battling in their mind whether to say hello or not.
Yeah.
Whereas I think generally in the UK, I think people are more open to that sort of thing. I think we are more self-aware with the idea of small talk and approaching it, as opposed to kind of ultimately trying to avoid it. But yeah, what else would you say?
Well, it is, of course. I mean, I don't think this is really... It's like every time I go abroad, I'm surprised how cheap it is abroad.
Yeah, Finland is very expensive.
I think it's not just UK, it's literally any country I've been to. France was quite expensive, but, well, it was Paris. But, like, yeah, everywhere else is so cheap compared to here. Like, I'm just talking about, like, grocery shopping. Like, here, for me, it's normal if I buy, like, one bag of food, it can be like 30-40 euros. That's like normal to me. And then like, yeah, in UK or Russia you can get like like food for Russia so many days. Yeah. Oh yeah, well, Russia is its own case really, but yeah. We
actually saw today in Alapa, which is a Finnish supermarket. I'd say it's on the cheaper end compared to K-Market and so on. But we found it was a kilo of strawberries, but it was in a 250 gram box. But a kilo of strawberries, Finnish strawberries, is 21 euros. Whereas a kilo of the foreign strawberries, I think they were Spanish.
Yeah.
Were, I think, 6 euros? 5 euros? Yeah, the Finnish... No, it might have even been 4 euros. Either way, it was the Finnish strawberries were 5 times more expensive than the foreign strawberries. However, Liida did note that the foreign strawberries were actually on sale. Yeah, but nevertheless, the Finnish strawberries being 21 euros per kilo is quite expensive.
Yeah.
And as you said, actually, a weekly shop, well, you wouldn't be surprised to be spending 50 euros, I think, in a week.
No.
Normally 30-40 euros.
A week?
Yeah.
Even more.
Well, it depends.
It depends. It depends a lot where you shop and what you buy. Like, if you buy a lot of, like sweets and stuff, then obviously it's going to be higher. But, like, yeah, and it depends where you go. Like, K-markets they can be sometimes quite a lot more expensive if you go there many, many times. And, like, then the S-market chain is, like, it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I just wanted to quickly add for you listeners listening, I must remind you, yes, Liida is Finnish, despite her accent being incredibly well spoken. I've had people in the past believe that you actually speak a better British accent than myself and most other people.
Really?
Yeah, for sure. Though I'm sure your time with me is making your accent deteriorate. Do you want to quickly say hello to all the Finnish listeners?
Are there any Finnish listeners? Maybe.
Wow.
I don't know.
I'll have you know that people do listen to this.
Okay. Moi. Kaikki suomalaiset. I don't know what to say.
Well, I mean, that's classic Finnish small talk right there in action.
Awkward. Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, those are just a couple of differences. I mean, in general as well. I mean, actually going back to the similarities with Finnish and British behaviour. Well, I just think in general, both cultures do very much like to keep to themselves. I do think British people can just sometimes be a bit more nosy and want to know what's going on, whereas a Finn would kind of swivel quickly on their heels and walk in the other direction. But Brits and Finns are generally more inwards, I think. So
yeah. these are of course just like our experiences. Of course there are some Finns that are like complete opposite, like we're just talking in general.
I mean,
know?
I mean, another thing to consider though, Finland is often seen as the kind of rednecks of the Nordic countries of Scandinavia. I mean, do you want to describe what that means?
I was just this morning because I was listening to another podcast, Finnish podcast, and they just said like sometimes Finn just they're a bit juntti, which is like a redneck basically. It just shows in some situations. I don't know, like when we go abroad, it's just, like at the airport you can just see just people not really like understanding how it works and everything. Like you go to the check-in, right, where they check your bags and stuff, and they stand there, and then when their time comes they're like, oh, am I supposed to take my laptop out? And it's just, I don't know, but I guess I am also, like, I'm the opposite because I'm like 20 minutes before my time even is. I'm like panicking and being like, oh my god, I gotta get ready.
So by rednecks, do you just mean more outdated when it comes to international and modern things?
Yeah, I guess so. And we also have like this thing, if like, there's been so many times like a Finn makes it like abroad, like they become famous abroad somewhere, and then Finns are just saying that, oh, they'll come back to Finland, they'll never succeed, you know, and it's sometimes really annoying.
Finns are quite not nationalistic in the sense that Russia is, but there is a lot of Finnish pride, a lot of Finnish sentiment. I mean, in the UK, we often refer, so here's another similarity. In the UK, especially in times like this, you can see people always referring to how things were in the war and the fact that we got through the wars and things like that, and that anything is trivial compared to how life was in the war, which is, true. But a similar thing here in Finland, there is, I think it's sisu, you said it was. Sisu is a kind of Finnish attitude with a Finnish way of life, really. There's no direct translation, but I would say it's more like, courage and tenacity. It's like get on with it, that sort of thing. If you're listening to the previous episode, it's actually very similar to Cameron describing the attitude in New Zealand, which typically affects a lot of young males, their mindset, the idea of just get on with it. But yeah, here in Finland they do often also refer to the Winter War and so on.
Oh yes. And I mean the younger generation is sometimes, personally me, I don't really mind. But some younger generation, like, they don't really like, just, when we have our Independence Day, we always bring up, like, Winter War, and we never talk about what Finland has achieved after that. It's always about the Winter War. Yeah. So, yeah.
I mean, with sisu, actually, just going back, with sisu, we did see the other day, if we were to take a picture that encapsulates the meaning of sisu, what we saw was, despite the coronavirus restrictions and despite the bad weather, it was raining, there were 3 Finns, social distancing, sitting there in the rain on the grass on a towel with an umbrella. And I think that is sisu.
Yeah, that is sisu. Yeah, like that is classic, like these memes about Finns just it being June, because sometimes it is quite rare, at least here in the south, I don't know about the north, but it is quite rare that it snows in summer. But it is possible, it has happened, and there are these pictures of Finns just going out and being like, it's June, yeah, it's snowing, but I'm gonna enjoy my ice cream here at the balcony.
I was disappointed with the winter here this year. I come in one of the warmest winters Finland's had.
Yeah.
And, I mean, yes, it did still snow. So, to give you some perspective, it was the warmest winter, but it still snows. For those complaining about it being cold elsewhere.
Yeah. But I mean, that was like here in the south. In the north, there was plenty of snow, I think. Yeah, the north is its own thing, Lapland and stuff like. But here in the south, I mean, we often do have a bit warmer winters. But like for an example, last winter we actually had so much snow that there was nowhere to put the snow anymore. I just remember it was difficult walking because you were just surrounded by all this snow and no one knew where to put it anymore. And like once I was at my friend's place and I couldn't get out from the door because there was like a block of snow blocking me to get out from the...
At least Finland does handle their snow professionally, though. In the UK, it is just panic. And actually in Moscow last year, while I was in Moscow, there was an incident, and this happens quite a lot, is that when there is too much snow in Moscow, they basically shovel the snow out of the richer areas and dump it into the poorer areas, even on people's cars. And so, in fact, a lot of people who are less privileged, say, in Moscow, they just had snow dumped on their cars and they weren't able to get to their cars or their streets.
God.
So, yeah,
That's
I
awful.
mean, yes, there's, even when there is too much snow here in Finland, they still kind of do it respectfully. But speaking of Russia, now, sadly, because of the restrictions, and all of us are affected by that, does mean... I mean, it's the summer. It is the season for travel, and that means we won't be able to do it. And Liida, I mean, you love to travel, and you really want to go some places. And where is it you would like to go if you could?
Right now?
Yeah.
Where would I go? Oh, no, I don't know. There's so many places. I mean, I've said a million times how much I miss Moscow. I'd really love to go there. So, yeah, I guess that's what I'm supposed to say.
But when I said speaking of Russia, I was heavily hinting that would be the
I know, you were like...
but yeah, no, we were talking about going back to Moscow. It's a wonderful city. I do recommend it for anybody if you do get the opportunity. Though for British listeners, the visa is around £80-90. And you have to do it in advance. Quite like a month in advance or something. And you have to go to the embassy or the visa centre in London. Though I think there is one in Manchester and Edinburgh as well, but yeah, it's quite a process.
I mean, it's the same in Finland, though. I don't know that we do have quite a lot of the visa centres, though. It's not just in Helsinki; they're like in many places. But I mean, it's not like people sometimes, especially like filling in all the papers and stuff. People make it to be such a huge thing. It's really not. It just they ask some of your personal information and. Of course it's unfortunate that it's expensive to get the visa because otherwise it's really cheap to go from here, Helsinki, to like Russia. But because of the visa, it's quite expensive. Yeah,
I would still say though, for those unfamiliar to the process, it can be quite daunting. But once you've done it once, you can do it again really quickly. I mean, when I do my Russian visa applications, I can get it all done in under 10 minutes, really, and then you just have to go to the centre. Yeah. And if you live near London, then obviously it's not as bad. But for those who have to travel, it can be quite... You can... I think you can... No, you can't get the visa postally by post. But you can receive it once you've done the process by post. But yeah, there is that.
I think in Finland we're about to get... I can't remember exactly. I think
an online process.
Yeah, online thing. Yeah, in Finland.
Yeah, see, Finland's living in 2030. In fact, recently there was something here in Finland that did make me laugh quite a lot, and I might share it in a link. So Finland celebrates Vappu every year, which is on May the 1st. Well, it's celebrated normally April 30th.
Yeah, that is kind of the eve. Yeah. And then when we celebrate... And then the 1st of May is kind of when we more like chill. We go out for picnics and stuff, and it's kind of everyone's hangover. And
and it is a big event. I mean, for those UK listeners, again, I will say, living abroad has made me slightly upset with the fact that we never celebrate anything in the UK. We celebrate Christmas and birthdays, and then maybe St. Patrick's Day, maybe Halloween, maybe Easter, but they're not really big things. And there's St. George's Day, which no one ever pays attention to, sadly. But here in Finland, they celebrate quite a lot of things. And Vappu is one of the big national holidays. And because of the restrictions, and they didn't want people going out in large groups, they did a online concert where you could create an avatar and join. And it was pretty interesting to see. It's an online concert where they have what were the performers? They're quite famous. I recognise them.
They're quite a famous duo, two men, quite popular.
Yeah. And they had them green screened on the front outside the cathedral, but in this kind of 3D online environment. And then you had your avatars, like thousands of people controlling avatars on the in the kind of audience area, doing like dances and things like that with the it was basically a game, pretty much an in-game concert, which was I mean, as I said, Finland lives in 2030 or maybe even 2040 compared to the UK. But yeah. So we'll do a quick little rewind here because we've spoken about a lot of interesting stuff already, but this is a show dedicated to letting people talk about their lives, their interests, and what it's like for them living in their countries. So, Liida, could you describe a bit about yourself?
Well, I was born in Finland. I was born in Helsinki, and then when I was young, we moved to Denmark, actually. And I lived there for 3 years, which is quite a long time, but I was so young that I can't remember anything. So, yeah, there's no way I can talk about living in Denmark. Then we moved back to Finland. We moved to Porvoo because my parents didn't want me to grow up in a big city like Helsinki.
Massive city.
Massive. Yeah. So we moved to Porvoo, which is quite close to Helsinki. Or it's really near to Helsinki. And I lived there basically most of my childhood and teenage years, went to high school there and everything. And then after I finished high school, I applied for university, and I applied to study Russian language and literature because I've always loved languages, and I had been studying Russian at that point for 5 years I think. So that was something that really interested me, so I just thought that, I want to create a career with Russian language and Russia in general. And somehow I managed to get in. And then I started studying. I moved to Helsinki. Well, now it would be my 4th year, but I'm having a break from that because I think I already realized, the first month studying, I was like, I don't think this is really my thing. But I just thought that, I'll just do the bachelor's degree and push through it, and then I can do something else. But now I'm having a little break. But before this break, I was in Moscow for 5 months. It was my exchange. I wanted to go there to see, do I really want to continue studying Russian or not? And there I realized that this is definitely not for me. I absolutely love Russia and I love Moscow, but just I can't see myself creating a career doing something with Russia and Russian as a job. I love to go there on my free time and stuff, but so now I'm kind of thinking, what shall I do on my free time? I think I love doing crocheting. That's one of my biggest passions. I like drawing, and writing has been my biggest passion for ever since I learned how to write.
Yeah, so there's a few things I want to talk about from that, actually. Number one being about the Finnish education system here. So as you just heard, as Liida just explained, she had a change of heart with her studies and so on. And the way things work in Finland, I think that the education system is fantastically flexible. And at Aalto University, they have a big push for supporting entrepreneurship and giving students time to have a year out to focus on business ideas and other kind of innovative ideas they might think of. And same with your studies, if you aren't happy with it, there's a lot more wiggle room with changing or taking a break. Whereas typically in the UK, from my experience, obviously everybody has different experiences, but from my experience, from what I know of people, university in the UK is pretty much a 3-year grind. People do take years out, but rarely, and it's normally for medical reasons. But in the UK, you start at 18, unless you've taken a year out, and you finish with your bachelor's at 21, which is very different to how it is here in Finland. Because there is military service for the men, and I think the women, it's optional.
Oh, for women, it's optional.
Yeah. So they normally don't start university till later, and even then, they then spend longer on their degree and take advantage of different skills that they can learn throughout their degree by taking part in different things. And there's no tuition fees.
We actually get paid for studying.
Yeah, they get enough bursaries that effectively they are paid to study.
Yeah, I mean, we don't, it's there are many university students who just focus on studying and they don't do any work.
Yeah.
But then there are many who do, but yeah.
Yeah, but that is a good thing. Sadly, in the UK, students aren't really a big part of society, and I think there is often a negative sentiment towards them. Whereas here in Finland, students are included as part of society. There are businesses that want to be involved with students' education. When it's national holidays, for example, with Finnish Independence Day, students are encouraged to hold the torch and walk through the city. And they get a uniform, or not a uniform as such, but there's a cap, graduation cap as well, that people wear. So it's all a kind of, it has an identity, I would say. Whereas in the UK, students are kind of in it for themselves, and it's a big kind of muddled lot. Which I do think is something I'd like to see change in the UK. The other thing I was going to say is just a little throw out there. Liida, you said she's from Porvoo, which is a 30-minute bus journey away from Helsinki, and it is a classic winter postcard town. So for any tourist tips, if you come to Helsinki, go to Porvoo.
Yeah, it's the old town is really beautiful. I mean, I think I love going there, but I hated living there. It's like, it's one of those places. I mean, it's not that small. I think there's like 50 or 60,000 people living there now. Yeah. Which in Finland, that is quite a relatively...
Yeah, Finland's population is 5 and a bit million.
I remember that. So yeah, but it has grown a lot, the town, or well, I guess it's city, has grown a lot since we moved there, but yeah.
One thing I noticed when I was in Porvoo compared to other UK towns and cities, but to consider the UK does have a lot more major cities and towns. But Porvoo, for example, I can imagine growing up, there isn't that much to do around there. I think you won't see that many restaurants, for example, in Porvoo. There are a few cafes, a few iconic stores, like a Porvoo sweet shop, a chocolatier or something. And the library is quite a central hub, I think, for Porvoo. I think there was quite a lot of social activities going on there. But that's kind of it. It is kind of... Quite often when you see in films, people growing up in the US in some remote town, it can be a little bit like that. It can be sick like that. But Porvoo is beautiful as well, and especially in the snow and good weather. It's just great all year round. Yeah. And the third thing, I think you did underplay yourself a bit there, but yeah, Liida is really into crochet. And she has, let's say, I'm going to say decorated instead of invaded our apartment with her crochet. There's yarn everywhere. I can't breathe. And yeah. But can you tell us more about crochet? Because honestly, I mean, as a stereotypical male who's never experienced in crochet and knitting and so on, well, let's just say crochet knitting, I didn't know anything about it. And in fact, crochet and knitting have nothing to do with each other, which was the first thing that I learned. So you can tell us more about your crochet. What kind of things do you like to do? When did you get into it?
Well, I've been doing crocheting since I think I started it when I was 13, 14. So quite a long time, almost 10 years. And I started off with doing these, it's called amigurumi. I don't know, people who are into crochet might know it, but it's crocheting these small dolls or animals or anything pretty much, but you put all this stuffing in there. And I was doing that for quite a long time and kind of fell in love with crocheting again some time ago, probably a year ago or something. And now that we're practicing self-isolation, I hate that word, I've been doing a lot of different sort of stuff, and because my speciality has always kind of been amigurumis, but now I've also kind of started crocheting pillowcases and carpets, a very simple carpet though, and it's just really, I just love crocheting and watching a series or documentary or movie Yeah.
So I will provide. Lida's made a new Instagram for crochet. If you are interested in learning more about crochet, then have a look. But by the way, a lot of crochet is an understatement. She does a hell of a lot. But also, I mean, there's one thing you failed to add on there, is that you have crocheted BTS characters. So I think we're going to go into the K-pop hop.
Well, they're not. I didn't crochet the BTS members, but there's BT21 that are like.
There's a kind of like a chibi character of the members. So for BTS, those of you who aren't aware of the trending K-pop fandom, Liida was into it before it was a big thing, and she's obsessed with it. Now, there was actually a BTS European tour this year that has been postponed, so you've been disappointed about that. But if you were to try and get somebody into BTS, how would you describe it? What would you say about it?
Well, I think K-pop in general, and BTS, but I prefer, I hate when people are just about BTS when there's a lot more to K-pop. Everything is so well organized, so well planned. The choreographies are amazing. Like, I think an idol, well, that's why they're called idols. They're not called singers or artists. They're like idols because they're amazing dancers, amazing singers, amazing performers. Everything is always so well controlled and organized. It's just very different. There's just a really different kind of fresh feeling to it. And they also do quite a lot of... they stay in contact with the fans. For BTS, Twitter is a huge thing. Like, they post stuff there.
It certainly is a whole different genre of music with the way they engage with their audience, I will say. As somebody myself, I listen to a lot of international music, a lot of Russian music still as well, actually, from time in Russia.
Oh yes, Russian music is the best.
So with K-pop, their audience engagement is pretty phenomenal. I myself, I can't say I'm that into K-pop, since living with you, obviously. There are some groups that I like, but it's much more colourful, it's much more upbeat, and promotes a positive image, I think, compared to some of the UK top hit charts and so on. But, each their own. It's worth checking out. Don't hold a grudge against it if you don't know anything about it, but...
I have to admit, before I got into K-pop, I thought it's all like, there's so many like different bands. It's not all just like bubble gum like K-pop. Like, there's so many different styles. I think everyone can find something they enjoy.
And sadly, it wasn't just BTS that was postponed this year. Or cancelled. There's something else. Liida is a big Eurovision fan.
Oh.
You were looking at me as if you didn't know what I was about to say.
You look so serious. I thought, why has been cancelled?
Now, Eurovision is one of those things that, for as long as I've been growing up, I don't think I ever cared about it. I'm sure most of you listeners do as well. But I have to say, there is something with Eurovision that is actually quite interesting. It's just the fact that how to describe it? It's cool to see a competition between countries, really, on a international stage. And the music isn't as bad as I was led to believe. A lot of people do hate on Eurovision music. But there are some good ones. And the point is, when there are bad ones, that makes the show more entertaining in a sense as well. But yeah, how devastated were you when Eurovision was cancelled this year?
Well, yeah, I was really devastated at first, but now I'm just like, well, you can't. I've kind of, with all these cancellations, I've just been like, I can't do anything about it. Everyone's in the same situation, so. But yeah, of course it's sad. Yeah, I've been watching Eurovision since 2006, so, and it is kind of scary because Eurovision has been going on for such a long time, and there hasn't been a year without Eurovision, even though there's been many problems with Europe and stuff, lots of things going on, and now there suddenly is no Eurovision, so yeah, but Eurovision is great. It's great, and I think people sometimes take it a bit like too seriously. Like it's not like the Grammy show or something, like the Grammy Awards. It's nowadays it's not like, of course it's about the song as well, but also creating a good performance, and it's just fun to watch, and fun to listen to. And there are some really good quality songs. Like last year, I still think that is one of the best winners ever in Eurovision history.
Yeah, so Eurovision is worth checking out. I mean, it's not on this year, but maybe next year. It's actually quite sad this year because Russia actually did a really good entry this year. It's a band called Little Big, and Liida and I actually like Little Big outside of Eurovision. We've known them for a while. And they released a new song recently, which is worth checking out if you look up the group.
Amazing.
But it was quite likely Russia could have potentially won this year. And yeah, that would have been a good reason to go to Russia next year if them hosting Eurovision next year. So we spoke a little bit about life in Finland and life in the UK in general, but how did you find living in Russia?
Well, yeah, I don't think I completely explained about like my exchange in Russia. So, yeah, I went on exchange to Russia, to Moscow, and I studied in Moscow State University, and I just studied Russian as a foreigner. And I lived in the university actually, and it is a very cool building, yes. If you Google it, you'll be like, wow.
Yeah, MGU, Moscow State University, is quite an icon of a building, let's just say. It's one of the, is it Seven Sisters? I forget how many there are. One of the Seven Sisters, one of the 7 great buildings built by Stalin during the Soviet period. And yeah, it is big. And the fact that people live in there, it's weird. You look at it and you think it almost looks very official. You wouldn't think students would be living there. But let's just say the inside is very, very different.
I don't want to shit talk about it. It's, it looks very amazing from the outside. The inside is what it is. Honestly, I was expecting it to be a lot worse when my friend who also studies Russian, she actually went there before me. Like, she was there for the whole year. So she was telling me how awful it is and how many cockroaches there are, and I was just, how am I gonna live there? But it wasn't that bad. I bought a nice little yellow carpet from IKEA and a little lamp from IKEA for my room, and it made it a lot more nicer. But yeah, and to be fair, there was only one cockroach in our apartment. There were many in the kitchen, but you learn to live with it.
If that's the UK, that would get shut down. But it is a Soviet period building. So, I mean, for those who don't know, the Moscow Metro is one of the grandest metro undergrounds in the world. And basically, the architecture of the metro is the same as MGU, as the State University building. Inside it is very grand and very large and high ceilings, and the living areas equally... Well, not so much the actual student, like kitchens and so on. But it is old. It is old, and it hasn't been maintained or upgraded as such. So it's kind of an experience in itself, the fact that you're living in a Soviet-style building. Anyway, yeah, it wasn't your first time in Russia, was it? You'd also visited a town nearby called Tver for a while. And did you like your time in Tver more or Moscow more? And also describe Tver.
Yeah. So I was also in 2017. Yeah, 2017 in the summer. I was I think it was 10 weeks. I was in Tver, which is relatively large city, I guess. I have no idea in which direction, but quite near to Moscow.
I think it's northwest.
Okay, well, it's quite near to Moscow. I think we did like these weekend trips to Moscow, and it took less than 3 hours on the train. But yeah, I was there. It was part of my studies when I studied Russian language and literature at the University of Helsinki. It was part of our studies to actually go on this like small language course, little exchange for 10 weeks in Tver. And I like both the experiences in Tver and Moscow, but I just don't think the Russian way of studying is for me. It was just, yeah, I don't know. It's a different culture there than in here, Finland. So I was always like scared going to the lessons. Like, what are the teachers gonna now say? In Moscow, I only started really enjoying my exchange after the studying was done. Meanwhile, in Tver, I didn't have that pressure. I think in Tver we still like, the teaching wasn't as intense as in Moscow. It was really intense in Moscow. In a way, maybe I liked the experience in Tver a little bit more. I really liked the city, even though it was obviously nothing compared to Moscow.
The highlight of Tver is actually there's a museum dedicated to goats, which is very much worth recommending. I mean, Russia is an amazing country to visit.
It is amazing.
But please don't take it to heart when I say the Goat Museum is amongst the top 5 things to visit. That is not a good representation of the country. Now, yeah, it wasn't just Tver that we actually visited. A bit more to know about Russia is we visited Sochi. And Sochi is considered kind of a Russian holiday destination. I think it was quite I can't remember how exact number, but it is a significant number of Russians haven't actually left Russia. And a lot of them just holiday inside Russia, as you'd expect, because it is a massive country and there is a lot to see. So, for example, did you know that Russia has camels? I didn't actually know that, but it makes complete sense given how big it is. And Sochi was an interesting place for us to visit because half of it had been redeveloped because of the Winter Olympics and the Football World Cup, and the other half was still pretty much derelict and abandoned and broken pavements and bumpy roads and things like that. But it is still a wonderful place to visit because the climate there is really nice. The food, everything is really cheap. You can get taxis pretty much around entire of Sochi and Moscow for well under €5, £5. But Sochi, for me, it was iconic because I think I saw one of the most Russian sights. And that is when you go to a seaside, picture it in your heads now, when you go to a seaside, what do you typically see on the beach? You see families, you see kids playing in the water, you might see a couple, you might see men, women sunbathing on the beach. But no, in Sochi, on the grey sand, you'll see a group of about 15 men in Speedos standing in the water, just not swimming, not doing it, just standing there talking, which I think was an iconic Russian sight for me. But there was also in Tver, if you remember actually, Liida, in Tver, walking along, you would quite often get an old couple walk by, and they would be like shirtless and holding a boombox that's blasting the Soviet anthem or something. Yeah, but Russia is also an incredibly civilized and modern country in Moscow. It's actually way more advanced than a lot of the UK that I've seen. For example, their shopping centres aren't something to laugh at. Their shopping centres are amazing. They are massive, and they are incredibly well invested in, with a huge range of shops and experiences. The food there as well, believe it or not, in Moscow, in their shopping centres, they will offer all kinds of vegan, oriental, primarily not Russian cuisine, I noticed. In Russian shopping centres. It's very international there. But I think Russia is still pushing to become more international as a society, other than just their shopping centres. Because actually a lot of Russians come here to Finland to shop because it's tax-free. And, what's your experience of Russians in Finland? Because there's a lot of Russians in Finland, as you can expect, being neighbours.
Well, yeah, we do get, obviously, a lot of Russians, because I've heard that often, Russians want to come here because they think the Finnish products are better quality, and and so on.
Russian culture is still quite a big thing in Finland. You quite often find a lot of Russian-dedicated shops. I think Helsinki, ironically, Helsinki was rated as the most boring place for Russians to go on holiday. And yet it's actually the number one destination that Russians come because it's so close. It's kind of like their seaside trip, if anything. But yeah, for example, in the east, there's Lappeenranta, which is a nice place to visit, and you'll find a lot of Russian speakers there. A lot of Finns actually do study Russian compared to in the UK. I mean, in the UK, as we know, a lot of British people still find Russians as a bit of a mystery and a bit intimidating, whereas in Finland that's not the case at all. Russian culture is still quite a significant part of life and shopping and things like that in Finland. And in fact, the reason for this is actually a bit more than them just being neighbours, really. I think it's worth if we give you guys a little bit of an introduction as to Finnish history, for example. So yeah, a little bit of a history lesson. Hope that doesn't mean you press stop here. But Finnish history is quite interesting because Finland hasn't been an independent country for very long. Wasn't it 1919, 1918?
1917.
1917.
Shit, is it 1917? No, I'm really paranoid.
You're going to lose your Finnish citizenship.
No, it's 1917.
Yeah, so since 1917, Finland's been independent. Because they celebrated 100 years recently.
Yeah.
And Finland until then had been occupied by Sweden and Russia, incidentally. And so there was the Finnish Civil War, but I don't know too much about that other than it was the Reds and the Whites, and Tampere was a big place. But anyway, I'm going to edit that out. So during World War II, Finland wasn't a big part of the war because they themselves were actually fighting the Russians in Finland and in a lot of northwestern Russia. And that's because Finland played the game very well, I like to say, in the sense that they didn't like the Nazis or the Soviets, and they managed to play the game very well in the sense that they had some Nazi support to help fend off the Soviets when Russia was trying to invade Finland. And then as soon as they'd fended off the resistance sufficiently, there was the Moscow Treaty, and Finland then changed sides and then kicked the Nazis out of the southern tip of Finland. And that's how they basically managed to retain their independency. From 1942, I think, was the end of the Winter War. Sorry, 1944 with the Continuation War. There is actually a museum on Suomenlinna. Suomenlinna is another amazing place to visit in Finland. You take a short ferry ride out, and it's an island that is basically a fortress, a sea fortress, and there's some nice cafes there, as well as a good museum dedicated to the Finnish wartime history and occupation, as well as it's just lovely to walk around it, because Finland it has so many islands and so many lakes that you could spend a good few years going to these islands and lakes, and you'd have a great experience every time.
Yeah, and a very important part of being Finnish is going to the cottage, for an example, during summer, and why not autumn as well. Like currently, now that it's getting warmer and sunnier, I want to go to a cottage so bad again.
Yeah, Finnish culture is cottages and saunas. Not pronounced saunas for you British listening. It is not saunas. It's saunas. Sauna. Especially a kind of steam sauna with the rocks as opposed to a electric sauna, I think. But I'm also surprised. I think, can you remember the percentage of homes that have saunas? It's a big thing for your own home to have its own sauna.
Yeah. I mean, when we lived in Porvoo, we had our own sauna, actually. I think maybe... Yeah, I did, because it's the English way of saying it. I think we had a sauna in, we lived in 2 apartments in Porvoo. I think we had a sauna in both of the apartments, I think. But honestly, we mostly used it as a storage space because I've never been a huge fan of like saunas. I can do it once a year when I go to the summer cottage. It's cool doing it, but that's it. I've never really been a huge fan.
I'm not a big fan of the saunas themselves, but I do like the culture of what you're supposed to do, which is sit in the sauna for 10 minutes and then jump into freezing cold water and then get back in the sauna. That is fun to do. I haven't done it in ice cold water because it was a warm winter, but you know, I've jumped into the river after the sauna, and that is a good experience.
Also, it's like classic, if it's winter, you go to the sauna and then you come out and you jump into the pile of snow.
Yeah, that doesn't seem as fun to me because I like to be in the water. I feel rolling in the snow, I'd be more worried about cutting myself and getting dirty, but hey. I mean, on that line, it is also funny comparing how the British view nudity compared to how Finns view nudity.
Oh yeah, that's a good
We were at a place called Pispala, which is near Tampere, which is another major city, and we were sitting there just kind of on the lake shore, and a group of about 5-6 teenagers, group of young boys and girls, and they just walked straight up to the shoreline, and the men just got completely naked in front of everybody and just walked straight into the water. And I was sitting there like embarrassed. I would never just in front of strangers get naked and walk into the water. But that is a very Finnish way of handling.
Yeah.
I was surprised. I mean, the women still wore swimsuits. I'm guessing that is still a thing.
I guess so. I mean, yeah,
it's just the men who like to get out and show their...
That's a good point. Yeah, I've never. I mean, that is quite. Well, I'm not gonna say common, but like that is. I didn't even blink an eye or anything. Like that's just normal. But yeah, unfortunately, women I guess don't really do the same. Yeah.
Why is that unfortunate?
Well, because it should be equal.
Okay.
If men are allowed to get naked in a public beach, why aren't women?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I wouldn't want to be naked in public either way. That's just me. But anyway, I think we've been speaking for almost an hour now, and I guess I'll just say thank you very much for coming onto the show for episode 2. How have you found it?
Yeah, it's been really nice. Really cool experience.
I'm sure we're going to have you on the show again, maybe as a co-host.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
So, thank you very much for sticking around for episode 2. It was quite a fun episode. It was a little bit unusual, a little bit uncomfortable, obviously, doing it in the same room in our apartment with only one microphone. But hey, you've got to start somewhere. Next weekend, we will be having a friend from university on the show, who I will play a little sneak preview of what's to come after I finish talking here. And by sneak preview, I mean some of the 5 minutes of the lost episode. So next week will be completely brand new. We'll do another re-recording. But it takes some time because A, I was devastated when I lost that episode. And B, it's quite difficult to kind of rejuvenate yourself to kind of have have the same conversation with somebody, right? But, there'll be new things next week, and we'll be happy to talk about it, and we'll have it out on Mondays from now on, for the record. But I hope everybody's had a good week. If you could be willing to help out the podcast, the Tortcast, by just sharing or letting me know if you want to get involved. I'm always looking for having new guests on the show. It'd be a great help. I have a few people who are interested, so we'll be having people from Italy, France, Sweden, quite a few places. But as I said, it's a week-by-week basis, so there's lots to come. But anyway, have a good week, and here's the sneak preview of next week. Goodbye. Yeah, I was going to actually... We have a lot to talk about, because since graduating, I'm sure I don't just speak for myself here, but haven't really been able to catch up with quite a lot of people, other than a conversation every now and then, but that's about it. So, yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been writing your book for, well, a year and a half, 2 years, probably? Like, how did that go? How's it going? What inspired you? Where are you at now?
So I finished it. I finished it at some point, I think during... I've completely lost track of time. What day is it?
I forget what day it is every day.
I finished it at some point, I think, between third year and my master's. And I have an agent who is shopping it around to publishers at the moment. So hopefully, any second now, we'll hear back from someone going, yes, we want to publish it. We think it's great. I don't know. And I'm working on a second one because I enjoy suffering. So I'm going to see where that one goes. But I at least did finish the last one. It is done. I never want to read it again. I don't want to do any more edits, and I want to look at it again.
Wow, that's commitment. And yeah, what inspired you to do this? What's your novel about? Describe it.
Sort of nationality and how we relate to the places we come from. And how you reconcile with disagreeing with things that your country does and that kind of thing, set in a sci-fi setting. Pragmatically, it's really just a detective story. There are just themes in the background that I hope people notice. They should notice because I'm pretty obvious with themes.
Is this something anybody's able to read online just yet, or is it got to go through your agent and everything first?
I'm not giving my work away for free. I'm sorry.
Not a little sample?
No.
Maybe we'll get you to read a live extract, maybe.
I could if you wanted me to give people a taste for what they can't buy because it is not published. I will not publish it online.